don't want you there, Ethan said. I told them you're dead. He didn't shout or cry. He didn't even close his laptop. He just said it, eyes on the screen like he was canceling a reservation. Dead. Steam curled off the plate of pasta. I'd made garlic basil, the good parmesan I'd bought with tip money, and the hand-drawn card beside it. Congrats, Attorney Caldwell. I'm sorry. What? My voice came out thin. Ethan finally looked up. Dark hair pushed back, tie loose in blue light washing his face. My husband. The man I thought I knew. I told my professors, my classmates, the partners at Wells and Barnett, he said. They all think my wife died in a car accident first year. I stared. I'm right here, Ethan. Exactly. He sighed like I was the problem. That's why you can't come to graduation, Avery. If you show up, I lose everything. The fork slid from my fingers and hit the plate. You told them I'm dead. For what pity? It's not pity. It's narrative. He finally closed the laptop. Resilience, loss, they love that. It made me hireable. My ears rang. My heartbeat pounded so hard my vision blurred. You used my fake death to sell yourself, I said. You're missing the point, he snapped. These people live in a different world. Judges' kids' old money. They don't marry diner waitresses. They don't want to meet the girl who refills their coffee. Just a waitress. I looked past him at the black graduation robe hanging on the closet door, at the stack of student loan bills I'd helped pay. You told them I was dead, I whispered. He went to the hallway closet and yanked out my old duffel bag. Ethan, what are you doing? He shoved my clothes inside. No folding, no hesitation. Making it simple, he said. You don't call. You don't come near my school, my firm, my life. If anyone asks who I was married to... He dropped the bag at my feet. The little congrats card slid off the table into the trash. You never existed. The bedroom door closed. The lock clicked. And standing there between a cooling plate of pasta and a packed bag, I understood something. He'd already killed me in his story. He had no idea what a dead woman could do. If you've ever spent years believing you and someone else were building a life together, you'll understand how easily small cracks can masquerade as stress exhaustion or growing up. That's how it started with Ethan. Not with a blowout fight or a confession or some dramatic shift. Just tiny fractures, hairline, invisible unless the light hit them just right. I met him at Portside Diner 7 years ago. I was 19 broke and working doubles to help my mom keep the lights on. Portside wasn't glamorous. It smelled like bacon grease and burnt coffee, but it was steady. And steady meant safe. I knew every customer by their order, every squeaky tile in the floor, every morning. Regular who flirted for sport and tipped like they were allergic to money. It was my world. Then one night during final season, Ethan walked in. He slid into the very last booth exhaustion sitting on his shoulders like a physical weight. His hair was messy, his tie crooked, and he had law books stacked beside him like walls. When I came over with menus, he looked up at me with those tired blue eyes and said, "Coffee, please, and whatever food I can get for..." He dumped a handful of coins onto the table. This. I recognized the calculation instantly. Food or caffeine, not both. I'd lived that math. "I'll see what I can do," I said. I paid for his grilled cheese myself. Told Hank the cook it was a shift meal, even though I'd already used mine. When I set the plate down in front of Ethan, he looked at it like it was a miracle. "I can't pay you back for this," he said. "Sure you can," I told him. "When you're a hotshot attorney with a real paycheck, tip me $10. He laughed. Really laughed. And that was it. The seed was planted. He came back the next day and the next. We talked between my tables about school, about his dream of becoming a public defender, about how out of place he felt around rich classmates whose parents were judges and CEOs. Around him, I didn't feel like the broke girl who smelled like French fries. I felt seen, equal, enough. 6 months later, we got married in a courthouse. 2 witnesses from the diner. No family, no bouquet. Just us signing papers and laughing like idiots, because we were poor and young and convinced love made us bulletproof. Our first apartment was a 1-bedroom over a laundromat. The ceiling leaked every time it rained. The heating rattled like it was full of ghosts. The walls were thin enough to hear the couple next door argue about whose turn it was to buy toilet paper. But it was ours. And back then, ours felt like luxury. We lived on ramen and hope. I worked doubles. Ethan studied until his eyes went bloodshot. We'd fall asleep wrapped in a blanket on the futon limbs, tangled dreams big enough to fill the whole room. Every time I came home exhausted, he'd kiss my forehead and say, "Someday, Avery. Someday we'll look back at this and laugh. Someday, That word kept me alive. But success didn't change him. It changed how he saw me. The first small crack was subtle. He stopped posting photos of us, the ones from our early marriage, us with pizza on the couch. Us in thrift store clothes photos, us laughing in our tiny kitchen, slowly disappeared from his profile. When I asked, he said, "Professional image, babe. Employers look at that stuff." Then came the introductions. One afternoon, I stopped by campus to bring him coffee. He was standing with classmates outside the library. When I walked up smiling, he barely reacted. "This is Avery," he said quickly. "She helps me stay organized. Not, this is my wife. Just the person who helps." I laughed it off, but it stung. Like he'd put a hand on my back and push me out of frame. After that, he started going to networking events without me. "It's all suits and donors," he'd say. "You'd be bored." He'd come home smelling like wine I couldn't pronounce, buzzing from rooms I'd never been allowed into. And always, he'd leave me a kiss on the forehead, like a parent saying good night to a child. Then our anniversary dinner. I'd saved for weeks to buy a burgundy dress from a thrift store. It was too big, so I stayed up late, sewing the seams myself. When he came home and saw me waiting with candles and overcooked pasta, he frowned and said, "I'm exhausted, Avery. Can we not make tonight a big thing?" The candles burned out before he finished showering. And slowly, quietly, his shame turned into erasure. He started wearing his wedding ring on his right hand. "Easier," he said. People asked fewer questions. He told classmates he lived alone. Told professors he was focused on his future, not tied down. Told a partner at a networking event within earshot of a mutual acquaintance that he was unattached. Every time I tried to talk about it, he brushed me off. "This is temporary," he said. "When I make it, everything gets easier." Everything did get easier. But not for us. What I didn't realize then, what I couldn't see through the fog of double shifts and love that felt like loyalty, was how quickly a person can outgrow the things they once clung to, and how often the first thing they outgrow is the person who held them up. The cracks became patterns, patterns became habits, and habits became the quiet rewriting of our marriage. It started with small humiliations, the kind men like Ethan convince themselves are harmless, like the time I went to pick him up from a study group because the buses were delayed. I walked into the apartment living room to find 6 of his classmates on the couch with open textbooks and half-eaten takeout. Ethan looked up, startled like he'd been caught. "Hey, guys, this is Avery," he said, waving vaguely. "She lives here. Not she's my wife. Not we built this place together. Just someone occupying space." His classmates smiled politely, then went back to their notes. One of them whispered, "Oh, she's the roommate," and Ethan didn't correct him. I washed their plates later. The grease clung to my fingers long after the water turned cold. A few weeks after that, he got invited to a reception for finalists in a prestigious clerkship competition. I'd circled the date on my calendar, bought new insoles for my shoes, practiced doing my hair in a way that didn't scream waitress with 5 minutes to get ready. The night before the event, he sat on the edge of the bed and said, "Listen, these things are political. Optics matter. Maybe sit this one out. I don't want you feeling out of place. It was the most polite way he'd ever said, "You embarrass me." I nodded, said it was fine, told him to go kill it. When he left, I sat in the dark living room, staring at the burgundy dress, just hanging from the closet door, the one I'd planned to wear but now felt like a costume from somebody else's story. The next morning, he came home with glossy pamphlets and photos of himself shaking hands with judges. Not a single one had me in the background. And slowly he started moving further and further away, without ever leaving. Dinner became something he grabbed on campus. Even when I cooked, he'd walk and glance at the pot and say I already ate. Our schedules on us stopped overlapping. Our conversations shrank into 5-word exchanges. His kisses turned into quick brushes of contact, so faint they barely counted. There were nights I'd fall asleep alone on the couch, waiting for him, waking up at 2 a.m. to find him asleep at his desk, casebooks open like he'd collapsed under them. I'd cover him with a blanket, kiss the top of his head, whisper, "Good luck for the next day." He never remembered in the morning. One rainy Thursday, everything shifted. A couple from his program walked into the diner, clean shoes, pressed jackets, the unmistakable ease of people who'd never worried about rent. They sat in my section. I recognized them immediately. I'd seen their names on his group chats. When I came over with menus, the woman said Avery. Like the Avery from Ethan's stories, my heart lifted. He talks about me. She blinked. then looked at her boyfriend, then back at me. He mentioned you. Once I think he said you were someone he knew in undergrad. Someone he knew. Not someone he loved. Not someone he lived with. Not someone he vowed forever to. When they left, I locked myself in the bathroom for a full minute, pressing cold water to my face, until the burn behind my eyes faded. I started noticing other things after that. The perfume that lingered on his shirt one night, too expensive, too unfamiliar. The late-night texts he'd flip his phone over to hide. The way he'd shower before coming home, even though he claimed to be studying at the library. But the worst wasn't what he hid. It was what he didn't bother hiding anymore. One night, during a rare moment when we were both home before midnight, I brought up the missing ring on his finger. He held up his right hand, displaying the band casually. It's fine this way. People assume what they want. And what do you want them to assume, I asked. That. I'm focused, he said. Marriages are distracting, complicated. Students like me don't get the luxury of messy personal lives. I laughed. It wasn't a pretty sound. You mean wives? He didn't answer. From that moment on, I stopped recognizing him. His future grew brighter. Mine dimmed into routine wake work, clean support. Every day I'd tie my faded portside apron around my waist and think, this is temporary. This is just until he makes it. But making it didn't include me. And the strange thing was, part of me already knew. Because sometimes the person you love starts speaking a new language, one built from ambition and insecurity and the hunger to belong somewhere you never will. And you can beg, shrink, bend, soften, but you can't translate yourself into someone they're not ashamed to stand next to. The burgundy dress hung untouched in our closet, waiting for a celebration that would never come. And I kept working, kept believing, kept stitching us back together with hope he no longer shared, until the day someone else told me my husband was getting married, and I wasn't the bride. I didn't break down when I heard the 2 law students say his name. I didn't drop the coffee pot. I didn't even blink. But something inside me, some quiet, loyal part that had been dying slowly for years, finally went still. Ethan's wedding is next weekend, one of them said, stirring his iced tea. Crazy, right? Losing a wife that young, then finding love again with Judge Harper's daughter Guy's got resilience. Resilience. The word hit me harder than anything Ethan had ever said. I stood there with a pad in my handpen frozen above the paper, staring at the reflection of myself in the diner window. Same apron, same tired eyes, same girl he claimed had died. I walked into the kitchen like a ghost. Hank barely glanced up from the grill, but I felt his eyes follow me. He always knew when something cracked. On my break, I sat behind the dumpster, where it was quiet except for seagulls and the buzz of the neon portside diner sign. My hands were shaking, but my thoughts were clearer than they'd been in months. If Ethan wanted me dead and his story fine, I'd stay dead. But I wasn't going to stay silent, storming into the wedding pointless, dramatic, easily dismissed as unstable ex-wife. Posting on social media, he'd spin it faster than I could upload. No. If he'd built his reputation on lies, I was going to place the truth exactly where lies couldn't survive. I opened my phone, created a new email. No name, no photo, nothing traceable. Then I opened a spreadsheet. 50 names? Partners at Wells and Barnett. Faculty from his law school. The Harper Foundation Board. Miranda Harper's family office. The wedding planner. Insurance reps. HR contacts. Every person whose world intersected with his fake tragedy. And next to each name I wrote one question. Can you help me verify something about Ethan Caldwell's marital status? No accusations, no threats, no explanations. Just truth placed strategically, like tapping a single domino that topples an entire wall. My rules were simple. No public scenes, no illegal moves, no revenge for revenge's sake. Just the truth delivered quietly into the exact cracks he didn't reinforce. If he wanted a dead wife in his story, he'd get one. Just not in the way he expected. When you've been erased long enough, something strange happens. You stop trying to be seen. And when you stop trying, you finally start choosing. That's what the first month felt like, choosing myself in small, awkward, fragile ways. Nothing glamorous, nothing Instagram-worthy, just tiny decisions that stitched me back together thread by thread. The morning after overhearing the wedding rumor, I walked into Portside Diner, determined to work my shift without falling apart. It wasn't strength, it was survival. Routine was the only thing that didn't crumble on me. Maria glanced at me from the coffee station, her arms elbow-deep in mugs. "You look quieter than usual," she said. I shrugged. "Just tired." She gave me the kind of look that said she didn't believe me but respected my privacy. The diner at 7 a.m. always smelled like bacon grease, burnt toast, and old secrets. Regulars filtered in, truckers, fishermen, retirees, who came mostly for conversation. They nodded at me with the familiarity of people who don't know your story, but depend on your presence. I poured coffee, I wiped tables, I focused on movement, not emotion, but during my 10-minute break, sitting behind the diner with my feet dangling off the loading dock, something settled inside me, a sense of gravity pulling me back into myself. I wouldn't let Ethan decide who I was, not anymore. That afternoon, I visited a tiny studio apartment above Levine's used books, 4 blocks from the diner. The stairs creaked, and the hallway smelled like dust and lemons, but the moment I stepped inside the studio, I knew it was mine. It wasn't much. 1 window, a kitchenette that could barely hold a coffee maker, a crooked radiator that groaned every half hour like it was waking from a nap. But it was mine. Mr. Levine, who owned both the bookstore and the building, handed me the keys without asking too many questions. "You seem like someone who doesn't cause trouble," he said. And I like tenants who read. He didn't know how comforting that simple acceptance felt. That first night in the studio, I sat on the floor, eating leftover soup from the diner and listening to the radiator hiss like an irritated cat. My entire life was stuffed into 2 trash bags, a backpack, and a grocery tote. But instead of feeling pathetic, I felt clear. I woke up early the next morning to light pouring through the grimy window, turning the dust in the air into tiny floating stars. For the first time in years, I didn't wake to Ethan studying, sighing, pacing, or pretending not to see me. The silence was mine. The air was mine. My life finally was mine. The next weeks became a montage I didn't realize I was building. I patched the wobbly table Mr. Levine left behind using folded napkins from the diner. I bought a $2 plant from a sidewalk sale, determined to keep it alive, even though everything I touched in the past year seemed to wilt. I walked to work instead of taking the bus. I made grocery lists and stuck to them. I bought myself a $4 candle with a scent called Evening Harbor, which somehow made the studio feel less like a temporary shelter and more like a place someone could heal in. And at the diner, something shifted. One Thursday, Frank, the owner, and the closest thing we had to a benevolent dictator, called me into his back office. His office was basically a closet, lined with 20 years of coffee-stained invoices in a jar, labeled customer complaints mostly stupid. He didn't look up from his paperwork when he spoke. "You want more hours?" I blinked. "Aye, sure." "Yes, good." "I'm bumping you to senior shift lead, extra $1.50 an hour. You earned it, just like that. No speeches, no pleading, no humiliation, and something inside me steadied. Landon, our dishwasher philosopher, noticed too. One night while he was stacking plates, his voice drifted to me from the dish pit. "You're breathing different," he said. I laughed. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing, Good? People who survive stuff get quieter before they get louder." He said it like a fact, not a comfort, and it landed exactly where it needed to. Around week 5, I did something I had abandoned when I married Ethan. I signed up for a night class at the community college. Creative writing. I didn't tell anyone. It felt too delicate, too new. I walked into that classroom with the same burgundy thrift store dress I'd once hoped to wear to Ethan's graduation. Now it hung differently, less like a symbol of humiliation, more like a reminder that I was allowed to want things. My professor, a tired-looking woman named Dr. Morales, handed out a writing prompt. "Write about a moment that changed you." My pen moved before I could stop it. The night I became invisible, the night Ethan declared me dead, the night I realized disappearing wasn't the same as being gone. I didn't write his name. I didn't need to. I wrote myself back into existence. As the weeks rolled forward, my world expanded not dramatically, not explosively, but in slow, steady beats. I ran in the mornings when the air was cold enough to sting my lungs. I learned to cook meals for one without feeling pathetic. I started reading again books I picked from the discount shelf downstairs, and little victories kept happening. One Saturday, a well-dressed woman came into the diner alone. She ordered a latte, a grilled avocado toast, and asked for a quiet seat. When she left, she slipped me a $20 tip. Under the bill was a note. "Thank you for the calm service. You look familiar somehow." Later, I'd realized she was a partner at Ethan's firm, but I didn't know that yet. Not then. Not during this fragile period of rebuilding. I just knew I wasn't the same woman Ethan tried to bury. And piece by piece, Avery Cole started returning, not the version that lived under Ethan's shadow, but the version that had been waiting to breathe. By the time fall settled over Portside, the air shifting into that crisp, wood-smoke chill, I had built a rhythm that felt almost like a real life, not a repaired life, a new one. Every morning I woke before sunrise, pulled on sneakers whose soles were starting to fray, and ran along Harbor Lane. The ocean was always on my left, black and glossy, like ink spilled across the horizon. The cold air cut through my lungs, but it felt good. Honest pain, not the quiet, corrosive kind Ethan had fed me for years. In the evenings after my diner shifts, I'd climb the narrow steps to my studio, drop my apron on the wobbly chair, and sit by the window with a cup of cheap chamomile tea. From there, I could see the glow of the bookstore sign and hear the muffled sound of pages turning whenever the door opened downstairs. Peace. That's what it felt like, peace in a form I didn't recognize at first. One Wednesday night, while reading through a writing assignment, Mr. Levine knocked on my door. He never climbed the stairs too old, too tired, but that evening he did. "You left this downstairs," he said, handing me my composition notebook. I hadn't realized I'd forgotten it on the checkout counter. He paused before turning away. "You write like someone who's lived a life. That's a compliment, by the way." I felt something warm bloom in my chest. Validation from a man who'd read thousands of books meant more than anything Ethan had offered me in years. My writing class quickly became the anchor of my week. Dr. Morales pushed us hard short stories, character sketches, sensory exercises, but each assignment felt like excavation. I wasn't just writing. I was unburying myself. One night, Dr. Morales stopped at my desk after reading my latest piece. "This is sharp," she said. "Have you considered submitting to the community college anthology?" "No," I admitted. I'm not a writer. You are now." The certainty in her voice made my throat tighten. Meanwhile, Ethan's world was shifting subtle at first, then increasingly frantic. It started with a voicemail at 2 a.m., then 5 missed HSICT's calls in a row, then a string of emails with subject lines like, "Can we please talk? You don't understand what you're doing. Avery, stop." I didn't answer any of them, but I read them, carefully, coldly. He was unraveling. I could hear it in the clipped sentences, the frantic tone bleeding through each word. The precision he used to pride himself on was gone, replaced by anxiety, fear, the unmistakable panic of someone whose carefully staged lie was beginning to fray. At the diner, even the regulars started noticing something in my posture. Lighter shoulders, steadier steps. One slow afternoon, while I was refilling the napkin holder, Maria leaned over the counter and whispered, "You're glowing. Did something good happen?" I smiled without explaining. "Maybe I'm just sleeping better." "Good," she said. "You deserve a damn break." A week later, Frank approached me again. "You ever think about managing full-time?" he asked while stirring his styrofoam cup of instant coffee. I blinked. "You," he repeated. "You're reliable, the staff listens to you, and the customers don't complain about you, which is rare as hell." It was the closest thing to high praise Frank would ever give. "I'll think about it," I said, but he waved a hand. "Don't think too long. Life's short. Life's short." Funny how that phrase hit differently when your husband had declared you dead. At night, when the air got colder, the radiator in my studio would groan and clank like it was complaining about its workload. I'd sit with my legs tucked under me, laptop open, notebook beside me, the burgundy dress hanging on the back of my chair, like a ghost of the girl who once believed Ethan's future included her. One evening, while editing a story for class, I found myself staring at that dress, really staring. For the first time in months, I didn't see humiliation attached to it. I saw possibility, resilience, a version of myself that existed long before Ethan's lies took shape. So I washed it, ironed it carefully, hung it up for the day I knew I'd need it, not for him not to be seen by him, but for myself. For the moment, I'd stand on the outskirts of his new life and watch the truth bloom from a distance. That day was coming. I could feel it like a shift in air pressure. One Saturday, during the brunch rush, a group of lawyers came in sharp suits, expensive watches, the kind of people who treated the diner like a novelty. Among them was the woman who had tipped me $20 weeks before. This time, she stared at me longer. "Excuse me," she said, motioning me closer. "Have we met?" I forced a polite smile. "I think you were in a few weeks ago. Same table?" "No, before that," she said slowly. "Your face, it's familiar." My pulse jumped, but I kept my voice steady. "I get that sometimes." She squinted like she was connecting faint dots. "And then I remember. You used to bring study snacks to Ethan Caldwell, law library, 2 years ago. Her words hit like a drop plate, loud in my chest, sharp at the edges. I forced a soft laugh. Small town. She nodded slowly, but her expression said she was thinking hard. What's your name again? She asked. Avery, I said, because lying wasn't my sport. Her eyebrows twitched. Something had clicked. Something she wouldn't say aloud in a public diner. Well, she said carefully, it's good to see you're doing well. She left a hefty tip again, and I knew. She knew. Or at least suspected enough to question the version of reality Ethan had fed everyone. After she left, I went to the back to breathe. Landon stood by the dish sink, soap up to his elbows. You okay? He asked. I think I whispered, I think the universe is working. He nodded like he'd been expecting that. As fall deepened, the calls to my anonymous email increased. Wedding vendors, law firm assistants, even someone from the Harper Foundation. Always the same question. Are you sure you're who you say you are? Always the same response. I'm only seeking clarity. No threats. No accusations. Just truth placed exactly where it destabilized the lie. Through it all, I kept my routine. Writing, running, serving tables, repairing the studio one piece at a time, choosing myself in ways Ethan never did. Some nights I imagined what Ethan looked like as the truth pressed in on him, tired eyes, tense jaw hair slightly out of place. He used to hold himself with rigid confidence, but lies way more than truth, and eventually they pressed down hard enough to buckle anyone. I didn't need to see it to know it was happening. I felt it in the silence between his emails, in the hesitation between his calls, in the panic seeping through each new message. And when the wedding date finally appeared on my calendar, circled in red more as a marker than a plan, I didn't panic. I wasn't shaken. I was ready. Not for revenge. Not for spectacle. For closure. For the moment I'd stand at the edge of his new world, wearing the burgundy dress he once told me wasn't appropriate, and let the truth speak for itself. I wasn't returning to haunt him. I was returning to exist. Still me, still breathing, still alive in all the ways he swore I wasn't. And the best part, he couldn't stop it. There's a moment in every storm when the wind changes direction, not enough to knock you over, just enough to warn you that what's coming next isn't gentle. That moment arrived 2 days after I circled Ethan's wedding date on my calendar. It was 6:14 a.m. I was tying my hair back for a morning run when my phone buzzed. First one vibration, then another, then a chain of notifications so fast it sounded like my phone was panicking. 24 missed calls, 8 voicemails, 3 texts, all from Ethan. The first text was almost polite. Avery, please call me back. We need to talk. The second cracked. I know what you're doing. Stop contacting people about me. The third wasn't polite at all. I swear to God, if you ruin this for me, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. My stomach tightened, but not from fear. It was something colder. The kind of cold you feel standing in front of a freezer, with the door open, controlled. Clinical alert. I put the phone down, laced my shoes, went running anyway. Harbor Lane was quiet, the kind of quiet that sits heavy on your skin. Waves slapped the rocks in slow, steady rhythms. Boats creaked against their docks, and my breath came out in sharp bursts as I pushed my body harder than usual. He was cracking, and cracks always widen. When I came home sweaty and exhausted, another voicemail had arrived. I pressed play, letting it echo through my studio. Avery, look, I think there's been a misunderstanding. People are asking questions and you're making it sound like I lied. You don't understand how serious this is. You need to stop. He sounded nervous, desperate, almost scared. Not scared for me, scared of exposure. I made myself tea, sat by the window, and replayed the voicemail 3 times, not because it hurt, but because it confirmed exactly what I needed to know. The truth was spreading. Later that day at the diner, Frank cornered me near the soda fountain. You got someone bothering you? He asked, voice low. I blinked. Why do you ask? He held up the diner phone. There's a guy calling here asking for you by name. Wouldn't leave a message. Sounded off. Ethan. Of course. I wiped my hands on my apron. I'm fine. I'll handle it. Frank squinted. If he shows up here giving you trouble, you tell me. I'm old, but I'll throw a punch. I laughed, but my chest warmed. Support doesn't always come from who you expect. That afternoon, Ethan escalated. He emailed. Subject urgent. Message Avery. If you keep this up, I'll have no choice but to pursue legal action for harassment. Don't make me go that route. Funny how people who lie for years suddenly discover the dictionary definition of harassment when the truth starts knocking. I didn't respond. Instead, I added his email to the folder I titled Backups. Every message went there. Every threat, every attempt at rewriting. By evening, the storm hit harder. My anonymous inbox exploded. A catering coordinator. Are you confirming you are the spouse of the groom, the wedding planner? I'm sorry, are you saying the bride is not the first marriage a Harper Foundation staffer? We require clarification regarding a discrepancy in Mr. Caldwell's application materials. The tone wasn't hostile. It was curious, uneasy. Truth has a way of infecting systems built on false narratives, and Ethan's narrative was collapsing under its own weight. During the dinner rush, another complication appeared. A woman in a tailored navy suit walked in, scanned the room, and headed straight for my section. I didn't recognize her until she sat down and said, "Table for one." And Avery, I'd like a moment when you have time. The partner from Ethan's firm, the one who'd tipped me generously, the one who'd recognized me from the law library. My blood pressure spiked, but I forced a professional smile. Of course. Coffee. She nodded. Black. When I returned with her cup, she spoke quietly. I hope you don't mind me asking something sensitive. My pulse thudded, but I kept my voice level. Ask away. Your name, she said carefully. It's Avery, right, Avery? Cole? Yes. She exhaled. Not shock confirmed. I don't want to overstep, she continued, stirring her coffee, but Ethan has presented a very specific history to the partners, and lately things aren't adding up. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Silence can be a scalpel. She studied my face. I don't know what happened between the two of you, but someone's lying to someone, and it's going to blow up bigger than he thinks. Her tone wasn't cruel. It wasn't sympathetic either. It was the tone of someone who smells scandal before it hits the news cycle. She left another oversized tip. Not out of pity, out of respect. By the time I finished my shift, the air around me felt electrically charged, like the moment before thunder. When I walked out back, Landon was leaning against the brick wall smoking. He rarely smoked, which meant he was either stressed or thoughtful, or both. He blew out a thin ribbon of smoke. You look like someone standing in the eye of something. I let out a breath. I think things are shifting. They usually do before they fall apart. He flicked ash off his cigarette. You ready for that? I looked up at the sky. Heavy clouds piled over the harbor, dark and swollen. Yes, I said. I am. When I got home, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Ethan. It was an unfamiliar number. Voicemail. I hesitated before pressing play. Miss Cole, this is Sophie Hartwell, assistant to Judge Douglas Harper. We've received an anonymous inquiry regarding Mr. Caldwell's marital history. Would you be available to speak? I sat down hard. Judge Harper, Miranda's father. The man whose last name Ethan wanted more than he ever wanted mine. The pieces were sliding into place. Complication wasn't the right word. This was escalation. And even though I had set the dominoes in motion, I also understood something with crystal clarity. Once people in power start asking questions, the truth doesn't leak. It floods. I set down the phone, picked up my tea, and stared at the burgundy dress hanging across the room, silent, patient, waiting. The storm was coming faster now, louder, closer, and Ethan, he was running out of shelter. The next morning, I woke to rain hammering against my window and a voicemail notification flashing like an alarm. Another message, another number I didn't recognize. When I pressed play, the voice was calm, clipped, and official. Miss Cole, this is Rachel Myers from Wells and Barnett, HR. We've received an inquiry regarding a benefits discrepancy. Could you return our call benefits discrepancy? I didn't need context. I knew exactly which benefit they meant. The bereavement payout Ethan collected when he told them his wife had died. He'd cashed in on my imaginary death. It should have hurt. Instead, it clarified everything. I made a pot of weak diner coffee and sat at the tiny counter in my studio, letting the steam fog the window. Outside Harbor Lane shone slick with rain, the world washed in silver. He was losing control of his story, piece by piece, thread by thread. And it wasn't because I exposed him publicly. It was because everyone he'd lied to was now comparing notes. By noon, the complications doubled. The wedding planner emailed my anonymous account. We need confirmation on your relationship to Mr. Caldwell. There are liability issues for the event. Liability. That was the word that finally made me smile. At the diner, tension followed me like a shadow. Every time the door beeped, my stomach tightened just a little, half expecting Ethan to walk me out in, drenched from the rain, wearing that frantic, performative expression he used whenever his life was slipping. He didn't show up, but someone else did. A tall woman in a gray skirt suit hair in a sleek bun, a leather folder tucked under her arm. She scanned the diner, spotted me instantly, and walked over. "Are you Avery Cole?" she asked. I set down my pen. "Yes." She extended a business card. "I'm with the Harper Foundation." Judge Harper asked me to gather some preliminary information. I didn't touch the card at first. About possible misrepresentation on an applicant's background check. There it was. Plain, neutral, deadly. The kind of sentence that could end a legal career before it began. I finally took the card. "I'm on shift right now." "I understand," she said. "But if you're willing, we could talk after. I'll think about it." She nodded politely and left no drama, no accusations, just a quiet exit that said everything without saying anything. The moment she walked out, Maria grabbed my arm. "Who the hell was that?" "Someone asking questions," I said. "About you." "About him." Her eyes widened. "Avery, are you okay?" I think I said slowly. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." But the storm wasn't just brewing around me. Across town, Ethan was spiraling. I didn't see it firsthand, but I didn't have to. His unraveling echoed through every voicemail, every panic-fueled email, every increasingly desperate attempt to reach me. By the end of the week, he'd called the diner twice more. Frank finally unplugged the counter phone, muttering curses about pathetic men with entitlement issues. That evening, as I wiped down a corner booth, Landon appeared with 2 sodas. "You need sugar," he said simply. I took the cup. "Is it that obvious? You're vibrating like a tuning fork." I exhaled. "He's, losing it." And part of me feels guilty. "Why?" Landon asked. "Because the truth hurts him," I shrugged. "No," Landon said, leaning against the table. "The truth isn't hurting him. The loss of his lies is hurting him. Big difference." He was right. But guilt is a stubborn ghost. Near closing, Frank called me over. He'd found a new voicemail on the unplugged phone. He pressed play. Ethan's voice burst through like a crack in ice. "Avery, I know you're listening. You need to stop this right now. You don't understand what you're doing. If Judge Harper hears that, if Miranda finds out, this whole thing could fall apart. You can't do this to me. To me. Not to us. To him." The message ended with a sharp inhale, like he was about to cry or scream or both. Frank shook his head. "You want me to get a restraining order?" "No," I whispered. "He's not dangerous. Just desperate." Frank snorted. "Desperate men are dangerous." I didn't disagree. But Ethan's danger wasn't physical. It was reputational, political, image-based. He feared humiliation more than loss, more than guilt, more than truth. And humiliation was closing in. 2 days before the wedding, the biggest complication hit. I came home from my night class, rain dripping down my hair, my fingers freezing, only to find a man in a charcoal suit standing outside my building. He wasn't blocking the door. He wasn't threatening. He was just waiting. When I approached, he stepped forward slightly. "Miss Cole." Yes, he handed me an envelope. No logo. No embossed letterhead, just my name, written in Ethan's handwriting. My stomach tightened as I opened it under the flickering porch light. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Avery, please. Don't come near the wedding. Miranda can't handle this. Judge Harper will destroy me. If you show up, if you talk to anyone, I'm finished. I'm begging you. Just walk away. Let me have this. I promise I'll stay out of your life forever. Ethan." The paper was damp from the rain, smudged in places where his pen dug too hard. I looked at the messenger. "Did he pay you to wait here?" "Yes." He said it was urgent. I folded the letter neatly and slipped it into my coat pocket. "Thank you," I said. "You can tell him you delivered it." The man nodded and left. I stood there for a long time, letting the rain soak into my jacket until it felt like part of me. He wanted one thing: silence. Silence had always worked in his favor, but not anymore. Back upstairs, I hung the burgundy dress on my closet door. Its color glowed softly under the warm lamplight, deep, steady, sure of itself. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a call, or a voicemail, or a threat. It was a screenshot from an unknown number. The message said, "Thought you should see this." It was a photo of a wedding seating chart. Under family of the groom, I saw it. A blank line, no names, just empty space where I should have been, where the truth should have been. I set the phone down. Everything inside me went still. Not raging, not trembling, just still. The kind of stillness that happens right before something breaks open. The complications weren't complications anymore. They were inevitabilities. And there was only one thing left to do. The morning of Ethan's wedding broke colder than it should have. Not winter cold, judgment cold. the kind that hangs in the air before a verdict is read. I woke up before my alarm heart pounding in a slow, steady rhythm. Not fear, not panic, something cleaner, sharper. Like my body knew exactly what this day meant. The burgundy dress hung on the back of the chair, catching the thin slice of sunrise leaking through my window. I stared at it for a long moment. That dress had once represented hope, then humiliation, then survival. Today it represented truth. I showered, letting the hot water burn my skin just enough to remind me I was still here, still real, still breathing in a world where my husband had tried to erase me. I did my hair simply, light makeup, nothing dramatic. This wasn't about spectacle. This wasn't about revenge. This was about alignment, putting truth where lies had been allowed to grow unchecked. By the time I stepped outside, Harbor Lane was drenched in early morning fog, the kind of mist that makes the world look half-dreamed. I walked slowly toward my car, the cold air biting at my ankles, the hem of the burgundy dress brushing against my calves. My hands shook only once before steadying. I drove out of Portside and toward the Harper estate, where Ethan was about to start a new life on the corpse of the one he'd buried. Traffic thinned the farther I went. The ocean disappeared behind hills. And after 30 silent minutes, the Harper property rose ahead of me, like something from a glossy magazine. Rolling green lawns, white archways wrapped in lavender, a long stone driveway lined with lanterns. Rows of white fold-out chairs faced a floral arch, and people in tailored suits drifted across the lawn, like pieces on a chessboard being positioned. Everything was perfectly arranged, perfectly curated, perfectly false. I parked far from the entrance, hidden behind a row of clipped hedges, close enough to witness, far enough to stay invisible until the moment mattered. For a minute I couldn't move, not from fear, just the weight of the moment settling into my bones. 7 years of marriage, 3 years of erasure, months of rebuilding, weeks of unraveling secrets, it all led here. I stepped out of the car. The air smelled like lavender and damp grass. Distant strings from a live quartet floated across the lawn, gentle, elegant, completely disconnected from the truth swelling under the surface. I walked slowly toward the outer edge of the estate, staying along the tree line. The dress caught bits of sunlight each time the branches shifted. I tucked my hands into my coat pockets and listened. Guests murmured. Photographers arranged equipment. Servers carried trays of champagne flutes. Laughs rose in careful, polite notes, like everyone understood the importance of maintaining appearances. I reached the corner of the lawn and stopped behind a tall planter, overflowing with white roses. It gave me a full view of the ceremony space, and of Ethan. He stood near the floral arch, talking to 2 men, one I recognized from the HR emails, and the other I assumed was from Harper Foundation Security. Ethan's posture was stiff, his shoulders tight, his smile glued on. He kept adjusting his cufflinks, then smoothing his hair, then checking his watch. Every movement jittered, every breath shallow, every glance edged with panic. He looked like a man standing on a trap door he'd forgotten he built. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel giddy. I just felt present. The quartet shifted into a brighter melody. Guests began to take their seats. A photographer raised his camera. And then Miranda Harper appeared at the top of the stone steps, the bride, tall, elegant, wrapped in silk that caught the sunlight like water. Her veil drifted behind her like a soft ghost. Her father, Judge Douglas Harper, walked beside her with practiced dignity, the kind that comes from a lifetime of people standing when he enters a room. I had only seen Miranda's face in pictures attached to event listings and online articles about her charity work, but in person she looked softer, younger. Someone who didn't know her entire engagement was built on someone else's fabricated death. She smiled down at the crowd with the ease of someone who'd never had reason to doubt the man waiting for her at the altar. My stomach twisted, not because I hated her, but because she had been handed a lie dressed like a future. And today the lie was about to collapse. Judge Harper inhaled deeply, scanning the guests. His eyes narrowed slightly. Something had disrupted the plan. He leaned toward the wedding coordinator, whispering something that made her pale. She hurried toward the rows of seats. Whatever Ethan told them, whatever story he built to save himself, was falling apart in real time. Then a familiar voice behind me. "So this is where you are." I turned. It was the partner from Wells and Barnett, the woman who had recognized me at the diner weeks earlier. Her hair was pinned up, her suit was charcoal gray, and her expression was unreadable. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. I'm not crashing the wedding, I replied. I'm just observing. Her gaze dropped to my dress, then lifted again. He lied to all of us. I said nothing. She exhaled long and slow. Harper's people started calling the firm last night, asking questions we couldn't answer. HR pulled his file. There are inconsistencies. A faint tremor tightened her jaw. You're the inconsistency, she added. The missing piece. I nodded toward the ceremony. Then you know what's coming. We know something is coming, she said. Just not what form it takes. Her eyes slid back to Ethan. He's terrified, she murmured. He should be. The partner gave me a long look. Not pity, not judgment, recognition. Whatever happens today, she said softly, you didn't create this. She stepped away, heading toward the seating area, leaving me alone again at the edge of the lawn. The music swelled. Servers lined up with champagne. Photographers clicked. Guests whispered. A hush fell as Judge Harper raised his hand. Miranda adjusted her bouquet, ready to begin her walk down the aisle. But the judge didn't move. His eyes were fixed on someone. Not Miranda, not the guests, not the photographer. Ethan. Mr. Caldwell, Judge Harper said, his voice carrying with judicial precision. A moment, please. Gasps fluttered through the seated crowd. The quartet faltered, violin strings catching awkwardly before silence swallowed them. Ethan's face drained of color. Judge Harper, sir, maybe after the ceremony? No, the judge said. Now. He gestured toward one of his aides, who handed him a thin folder, cream-colored, embossed, expensive, the kind used only for serious matters. Miranda's smile dimmed. She glanced between her father and her fiancé, confusion tightening her grip on her bouquet. The judge opened the folder slowly, methodically, like a man laying out evidence. According to our verification team, a question has arisen regarding your marital status, he said. The crowd murmured, head swiveled. My breath caught. Here it was, the first crack, the beginning of the end. Ethan cleared his throat, hands trembling. Sir, I can explain. Judge Harper held up a hand. We received multiple inquiries from external contacts, all asking the same question. He read aloud as Ethan Caldwell, currently married. Did he receive bereavement benefits under false pretenses? Is the groom's first spouse actually deceased? He closed the folder. Silence hit the lawn like a dropped stone. Miranda's bouquet slipped a fraction in her hands. Ethan swallowed. These are lies. Someone unstable is trying to sabotage me. Someone unstable. He meant me. My jaw tightened, but I stayed still. Judge Harper leaned forward slightly. So you deny having a wife named Avery Cole? The name hung in the air, my name a ghost resurrected. Ethan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. It's complicated. No, the judge said sharply. It is not. He motioned to the coordinator. Stop the procession. The quartet lowered their instruments. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Miranda took a step back. And Ethan finally cracked. I had to, he blurted. They wouldn't have taken me seriously if they knew. She didn't fit the image. Miranda's face collapsed in slow motion. Ethan, what are you saying? He looked panicked, frantic, sweating now. I only did what I had to. Okay, everyone lies about something. My story, our story, it was strategic. Strategic. The word sliced through the air like a blade. Judge Harper's expression hardened. You built your future on the falsified death of a living woman. Guests gasped. A few stood. Someone whispered, Dear God. Miranda's bouquet dropped to the grass. Ethan reached for her. Miranda, please listen. I chose you. I chose a life with you. She recoiled. You chose convenience. You chose a lie. Her voice trembled not with fear, with betrayal, the kind that redraws a person in real time. Ethan collapsed to his knees, running his hands through his hair. Please don't do this. Everything I've built, everything I've worked for, wasn't yours to build on falsehood, the judge said. Then his voice changed cold judicial absolute. This wedding is put on hold. The words echoed across the lawn. Guests rose in waves. Photographers lowered cameras. Servers froze. And I stepped back, hidden behind the roses, heart steady, breath even. This wasn't revenge. This was truth. And the truth wasn't finished yet. The moment Judge Harper suspended the wedding, the entire estate froze into a single stunned tableau. Miranda stood rigid near the arched silk train spilling behind her, like a wounded ghost. Guests murmured in tight clusters, exchanging whispers, sharp enough to cut through the lavender-scented air. The quartet lowered their bows. The wedding planner clutched her clipboard like a shield, and Ethan looked like a man watching his life get peeled apart inch by inch. His breathing was jagged, his face slick with sweat, his neatly combed hair now disheveled as he dragged shaking fingers through it. His gaze darted around the lawn, looking for something to anchor to, but every eye watching him carried a single expression: betrayal. The kind of betrayal that had witnesses, recordings, repercussions. Judge Harper took a step closer, his presence towering authoritative, in a way that only men who have delivered sentences and shaped legal futures can be. "I will ask again," he said, his voice low and cutting. "Are you or are you not currently married to Avery Cole?" My name hit him like a slap. He flinched barely, but enough. Ethan swallowed hard. It's complicated." "There is nothing complicated about marriage," Harper replied. "It is binary. You are married or you are not." Ethan's voice cracked. "Please, sir, if we could talk privately." "No," the judge said sharply. "This involves my daughter. This involves my family. And it involves the reputation of multiple institutions who trusted you." The air crackled with tension. Miranda finally spoke. Her voice was quiet but steady. "Ethan, you told me your wife died. You showed me the obituary." My breath hitched. She'd seen the obituary, the fake obituary. A wave of cold rolled down my spine. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut. I had to. I had to create context. I had to look like I overcame something. "You used someone's death," Miranda whispered. "You used her." It wasn't like that Ethan protested, but his words stumbled over themselves, frantic, unconvincing. Judge Harper glared at him. "Did you or did you not receive bereavement funds from Wells and Barnett?" Ethan hesitated. It was an administrative misunderstanding. That is not an answer." One of the partners from the firm, the same woman who had recognized me at the diner, stepped forward from the front row. "We reviewed the paperwork," she said coldly. "You claimed your wife died in 2019. You signed the form. You accepted the money. You gave your supervisor a story about the accident." Ethan's knees buckled. He clutched the back of a chair to stay upright. Miranda's hands trembled, gripping the edges of her gown. "You told me you never had a family. You told me you grew up alone. You told me you didn't have anyone who would miss you." Ethan stared at her with a desperation I hadn't seen since the nights he'd study, until his eyes were crimson. "Miranda, please listen. I thought knowing the truth would make you leave. I thought I'd lose everything." "You've already lost everything," she said softly. The wind picked up, rustling the white roses and lavender sprigs decorating the aisle. It felt like the whole estate was holding its breath. Then one of the guests, a middle-aged man I didn't recognize, spoke loud enough for the entire lawn to hear. "Who is Avery Cole?" Ethan stiffened. He knew exactly where that question would land. Judge Harper turned slowly, scanning the crowd, his eyes sharp and calculating. "I would also like the answer to that." The partner from the law firm added, "If the woman is alive, she deserves to speak." Ethan panicked. "She's not here," he insisted. "She's unstable. She's doing this to hurt me." I almost laughed. Unstable, the irony was almost too rich. Then another voice joined the mix. One of the Harper Foundation board members stepped forward. "We verified a birth certificate, a marriage license, several tax filings, medical records, photographs. Avery Cole is real." Ethan turned white. Miranda looked around the lawn as though expecting me to appear from thin air. "Where is she?" she whispered. Her question sliced the silence, and suddenly every head turned. Every gaze swept across the estate. Every pair of eyes searched, probing the edges of the lawn, scanning the corners, drifting closer and closer to the planter where I stood hidden. Ethan's voice cracked. "She won't come. She wouldn't dare show her face here." He said it with a certainty that made my chest tighten. A man who had rewritten the truth for so long genuinely believed I had no power left. He believed I was too small, too scared, too invisible. He had no idea how wrong he was. Judge Harper took a commanding step forward. "Mr. Caldwell, unless you present evidence that disproves the claims made, today you will face legal and professional consequences." The word consequences made Ethan flinch again. He looked like he wanted to run, like he wanted to rewind years of lies, like he wanted to claw his way out of the web he spun too tightly. Instead, he collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. The guests were murmuring again, louder this time, like a rising tide. "Is she alive? Did he fake her death? How did he think he'd get away with this? This is a scandal. Poor girl, wherever she is." He lied to all of them. Their voices swirled in the air like smoke. Then someone near the front turned around. The partner. The woman with the sharp eyes and sharper instincts. She looked directly at me. not accidentally, not vaguely, directly. Her gaze locked onto mine across the lawn, unblinking, steady, aware. She didn't point. She didn't call attention. She simply held my eyes for a long, quiet second. A second that said, I know who you are. I know what he did. And the truth belongs to you. I inhaled. The cold air filled my lungs with a clarity that felt almost weightless. The time for hiding had passed. The moment for silence had expired. The truth, my truth, had arrived at the edge of the aisle and waited for me to step into it. I walked out from behind the roses, slowly, purposefully. The burgundy dress catching in the sunlight like a drop of wine spilled on white linens. A few gasps rippled through the nearest row of chairs. Someone's hand flew to their mouth. Another person whispered, "It's her." Miranda turned. Her breath hitched audibly. Her veil fluttered like it had been struck. Judge Harper's eyes narrowed, not in hostility, but in assessment, calculation, recognition of a missing witness finally taking the stand. Ethan didn't look up at first, but he felt the shift in the air, the hush that fell like a curtain, the way the murmuring tapered into breathless silence. Then he lifted his head. His eyes found me. Every muscle in his body locked. His mouth fell open. His face twisted into something between horror and disbelief. He whispered my name, Avery. His voice cracked like thin ice. The crowd parted slightly as I stepped forward, though I remained several yards away from the altar. I didn't need to walk farther. The truth didn't need a stage, just presence, just existence. Judge Harper was the first to speak. "You are Miss Cole." It was not a question. "Yes," I said simply. My voice carried easily, not loud, not theatrical, just clear. The judge studied me, reading every detail, my posture, my eyes, my steadiness. "And you are alive." "Yes." A ripple passed through the guests. Cameras, phones, faces, everything shifted toward me. Miranda took a small step forward, her bouquet trembling in her hands. "He told me you died." I nodded once. "He told everyone that." Ethan stumbled to his feet. "Avery, please, you don't understand. I understand perfectly," I said. "You needed a tragedy, so you made one." Every head turned back to him. Every breath seemed to hold. Ethan's hands shook. "I can explain." "Don't," I replied. "You've explained enough." My voice wasn't angry. It wasn't trembling. It was calm, so calm it cut sharper than any scream. And that calmness, that utter steadiness, was what finally broke him. Not a word, not an accusation, just the undeniable fact that I existed, alive, present, unbroken. Miranda stared at me, tears forming in the corners of her eyes, not because of me, but because of the man beside her. Judge Harper closed the folder in his hand. The sound echoed like a gavel. "This wedding cannot proceed," he declared. "There is too much deception here to ignore." Ethan looked between me, Miranda, and her father like he was drowning and every life preserver had been yanked away. "Please," he begged Miranda. "Baby, please don't leave me like this." Miranda stepped back, tears sliding quietly down her cheeks. "You lied about a woman's death," she whispered. "What else were you willing to lie about?" Ethan fell silent. The kind of silence that happens when a man realizes he has nothing left to bargain with. Nothing left to spin. Nothing left to manipulate. Nothing left to hide behind. And as I stood there still at the edge, still distant, I understood something with absolute clarity. This wasn't my downfall. It was his. And the truth wasn't done yet. Time slowed. Not in the romantic movie magic way. In the brutal way when the truth becomes too loud, too bright, too undeniable. A soft breeze pushed through the lavender arch, scattering petals across the aisle like confetti from a celebration gone wrong. Guests murmured, shifting in their chairs, watching the scene play out with the silent intensity of people witnessing a public execution. Only this execution wasn't mine. It was Ethan's. He stumbled forward, reaching a hand toward me, as if proximity might rewrite what everyone already knew. But the space between us felt like a canyon carved by years of deceit. "Avery," he said, his voice trembling, "please, just listen to me." I didn't move, didn't answer, didn't offer him even a sliver of refuge. Judge Harper stepped between us, not aggressively, but with the quiet authority of a man who'd spent decades separating truth from fiction. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, "you will not address her unless she chooses to speak with you." The power in that sentence sent another ripple through the crowd. For the first time, I saw something in Ethan I had never seen before. Fear. Raw, destabilizing, humiliating fear. Not that he'd lost me. know he'd lost control of the narrative. Harper turned his attention to me. Miss Cole, if you wish to make a statement, you may. If you do not, we will proceed without it. I looked at Miranda. Her makeup was flawless, but her expression was fractured anger, shame, sorrow, disbelief, all trying to coexist in the same small space behind her eyes. She clutched her bouquet like it was an anchor, or a weapon. I didn't want to hurt her. I didn't want revenge on her. I wanted clarity. I wanted the truth to stand in the open, not in the shadows where Ethan had kept it caged. So I spoke. My name is Avery Cole, I said. I was married to Ethan for 3 years. We met 7 years ago. We built a life together. I worked double shifts so he could finish school. I supported him through every exam, every interview, every setback. The crowd leaned in. Ethan covered his face again. We lived in a tiny apartment over a laundromat, I continued, and every night I believed we were building a future together. Miranda flinched. I looked directly at Ethan. He looked like he might crumble under the weight of my gaze, but the moment he started climbing, just a few inches above where we began, he decided I didn't belong in the life he wanted, a life with influence, a life with prestige, a life that required him to scrub anything, anyone, that didn't fit the image. My voice didn't crack. Steady, controlled. The crowd was silent, so silent that even the rustling leaves seemed to hold their breath. He erased me, I said piece by piece, first privately, then publicly, finally, legally. Ethan choked out, Avery, please don't, I answered. You made your choices. Judge Harper gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod, an acknowledgement that the floor was mine. I continued. He told people I was unstable, that I'd left him, then that I'd died. He pushed me out of his story so he could write one that made him look heroic, resilient, worthy of this family's approval, worthy of this firm, worthy of a future he wanted to claim by pretending his past had never existed. Miranda's lip trembled. He told me you were gone, she whispered, voice shaking. I nodded. I know. And I'm not here to ruin your life. I'm here because he used my death to build yours. Gasps rippled across the chairs. Ethan stepped forward, tears streaking down his face. I loved you, Avery. Things got complicated. Opportunities came up. Expectations, pressure. You don't understand what it's like, I cut him off. Yes, I do. I lived those pressures with you. I carried them with you. Until you decided it was easier to carry them alone, or pretend they never existed. Judge Harper's voice cracked through the tension like thunder. Ethan Caldwell, did you knowingly falsify the death of your legal spouse to gain sympathy, employment advantages, or personal benefits? Ethan opened his mouth. For one breath, he looked like he might lie again. But lies had lost their power. So he exhaled shaky, broken, and whispered, yes. A collective gasp swept over the estate. Miranda staggered back like she'd been struck. The partner from Wells and Barnett shook her head in quiet disbelief. And Judge Harper, his face hardened into something colder than rage. Professional, final, judicial. He motioned to his assistant. Notify security. Inform the board. Contact the ethics committee. Ethan panicked. Please, sir, please, you can't do this. Everything I've worked for. You destroyed it yourself, Harper said, voice like steel. You used my daughter as cover for your deception. You exploited your firm, your colleagues, and the legal system. He stepped directly in front of Ethan. You built your future on the grave of a living woman, and you expect mercy. Ethan fell to his knees, actual knees, like a man begging for his life. He reached for Miranda again. Baby, please, I did it for us. Miranda stepped away, tears streaking her cheeks. No, you did it for yourself. You don't even know what love is. She turned to her father. I'm done. Then she walked. Not dramatic, not angry, just done. Ethan crawled after her, literally crawled, before security stepped between them, holding him in place. The scene was painful to watch. Not because I pitied him, but because I finally saw fully and clearly the man I had once loved. A man who believed ambition was worth more than people, worth more than truth, worth more than me. And now he had nothing. Judge Harper straightened his jacket. This event is over. Please escort the guests to the reception hall while we manage the situation. There would be no celebration, only fallout. As guests stood still, whispering, still pointing, still trying to process the scandal unfolding around them, I eased back a step. I didn't need to stay. My part was done. But as I turned, Ethan's voice pierced the air. Avery, don't walk away. Please don't leave me like this. I stopped. Slowly, I looked back over my shoulder. He was on his knees, hands shaking, face blotched with panic and tears. The powerful, polished, promising law student reduced to a man crushed under the weight of his own lies. I didn't walk toward him, but I didn't walk away yet either. You left me long before today, I said quietly. I'm just accepting it. His face crumpled. And the world around us, the estate, the guests, the lavender, the musicians seemed to fold into silence. Then with my heart steady and my voice even, I added the final line he would ever hear from me. I don't owe you my silence anymore. No one spoke. Not Ethan. Not Harper. Not Miranda. The words hung in the air, solid, irreversible. Then I turned. And I walked. Through the roses, past the whispering guests, across the manicured lawn. The sunlight caught the burgundy fabric of my dress with every step, turning it into a trail of muted fire behind me. I didn't run. I didn't hide. I simply left. And behind me the wedding collapsed into chaos. Voices rising, security moving, Ethan's sobs tearing through the air. Miranda's family closing ranks, photographers snapping pictures of the scandal of the year. But none of it belonged to me anymore. I reached my car, opened the door, and paused once before getting in. I looked back at the estate, the arch, the chairs, the broken ceremony, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Lightness, not joy, not victory, not revenge, just release. A quiet exhale that had been trapped inside me for too long. I slipped into the driver's seat, turned the key, and let the engine hum beneath me. As I pulled away from the estate, leaving Ethan's world behind, one truth settled deep into my bones. He tried to bury me. But he forgot something very simple. The dead don't stay quiet. The morning after the wedding, that wasn't my apartment, felt unusually quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Aftershock quiet. Like the world had gone still just to hear what came next. I sat at my tiny kitchen table, the wobbly one with the folded napkin under the leg, and watched steam rise from my mug of Earl Grey. My hands didn't shake. My breath didn't hitch. The adrenaline from yesterday had burned off completely, leaving only clarity behind. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I told the truth. The rest had unraveled on its own. By noon, the world began catching up. My phone buzzed, nonstop voicemails, texts, missed calls. Not from Ethan. I'd blocked him months ago. These were from people who had never once spoken to me directly. People who had spent years pretending I didn't exist. The law firm, the Harper Foundation, a reporter. 2 anonymous numbers I guessed belonged to wedding guests hungry for the real story. I didn't answer any of them. If they wanted truth, they could find it themselves. I wasn't the fire, they were just seeing the smoke for the first time. Around 2 p.m., Emma let herself into my apartment, using the spare key she'd insisted I give her after everything happened. She didn't knock, just pushed the door open and called out, "You alive in here?" I raised my mug in a half salute. Barely. She dropped her purse on the couch and sat across from me. So, I heard the wedding exploded. Imploded, I corrected. They kind of did it to themselves. Emma whistled long and low. "You're a legend at my office today?" I groaned. "No, please. No legend." "You didn't show up," she said. "They found you." That made me stop. She wasn't wrong. I didn't crash anything. I didn't scream, didn't confront, didn't expose. I simply existed in places Ethan swore I didn't. Existence shouldn't feel like warfare, but it did yesterday. "What now?" Emma asked quietly. I wasn't sure if she meant Ethan or me, so I answered the only part that mattered. "Now," I said, "I keep living." She nodded, once satisfied. But the world wasn't done with me yet. That evening, someone knocked on my door. Firm, professional, no hesitation. I froze for a second, then opened it, a crack. Standing there was a tall woman in a navy pantsuit, hair slicked into a perfect bun expression unreadable. I'd seen her before, but never in real life. Wells and Barnett partner, the one Ethan always worshipped, the one he said could make his entire career with a single recommendation. She held a manila folder in one hand. "Miss Cole," she asked. I hesitated. "Yes, I'm Alexandra Wynne," she said. "May I come in?" Everything in me screamed no. Every memory of law students treating me like furniture made me want to slam the door. But she didn't look dismissive. She looked tired and determined. So I stepped aside. She entered my apartment and paused to take in the space, not judgmentally, but as if she were mapping context. Her gaze lingered on my bookshelf, the potted plants on the sill, the burgundy dress draped over the chair. Then she set the folder down. "I owe you an apology," she said. I blinked. "For what?" "For believing a lie without verifying it." Her voice had the clipped precision of someone used to testifying under oath. "For 2 years, Ethan Caldwell spoke of you with reverence, grief, and emotional detail. He used your death to build rapport with clients and gain leverage with partners. He strategically referenced you during interviews. We thought we were supporting a widower rebuilding his life. Her jaw tightened. And yesterday we learned he had weaponized an imaginary tragedy. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know she or anyone at the firm had been part of Ethan's script. Miss Wynne slid the folder toward me. This is the internal ethics report, she said. You're not obligated to review it, but it documents everything he did using your name and your death. I didn't touch it. She continued falsifying marital status, misusing bereavement benefits, using your fictional death as grounds to request special case assignments, manipulating the Foundation's charity board for sympathy. And this part you may not know, he also claimed you died in a drunk driving accident caused by another attorney's negligence. I felt like the breath had been knocked out of me. He used me, I whispered. Repeatedly, she said, and deliberately. Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. Finally, she added, We've opened a formal ethics investigation. He's been suspended without pay pending review. The Harpers have also frozen their partnership contributions. I swallowed, hard. This wasn't revenge. This was justice unfolding naturally once truth had been released. Before she left, Miss Wynne looked directly at me. I want you to hear this, she said. Your presence didn't ruin his life. His lies did. All you did was stand upright in a place he hoped you'd never stand again. I didn't cry. But something inside me loosened like a knot unraveling after years of being pulled tight. When the door closed behind her, I finally allowed myself to breathe deeply. Not in relief, but in recognition. Ethan wasn't the storm anymore. The truth was. And it didn't need my help to finish what it started. The fallout didn't happen in one explosion. It came in waves, slow, steady, inescapable. 3 days after Miss Wynne visited, another envelope appeared at my door. No return address, no handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Ethan Caldwell, Administrative Leave Ethics Review. Pending, do not contact clients or media. No signature. No explanation, just those lines. I guessed it came from someone inside the firm who thought I deserved to know how far the truth had already traveled. Maybe Miss Wynne. Maybe someone else who'd once believed Ethan's story and now felt complicit. I set the paper on my counter next to my tea mug. No triumph washed over me. No rush. No satisfaction. Just that same quiet understanding. A lie that big never collapses quietly. Later that afternoon, I stopped by Portside Diner for my shift. The bell above the door jingled, and for the first time in months, I didn't brace myself for pity or whispers. People were just people again. Eating pancakes, complaining about the coffee being too strong, asking for extra napkins. Normal life tasted like vanilla after years of burnt coffee. Landon was wiping down the counter. He studied me, really studied me, the way only someone who'd watched my entire collapse unfold behind fryers and cracked tiles would. You look lighter, he said. I feel done, I admitted. That's the trick, he said, tapping his rag against the counter. Not revenge. Closure. Hank slid me a slice of blueberry pie from behind the pass window. No words, just a grunt. He wasn't a man of many languages, but grief and healing were two he somehow understood perfectly. I carried plates, filled coffee cups, wrote down orders, and somewhere between booths 3 and 5, I realized something Ethan's story was no longer tethered to mine. He was unraveling in a world obsessed with image. I was rebuilding in a world that valued consistency and kindness. 2 different universes. 2 different kinds of gravity. Around 7 p.m., my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. My instinct towards self-preservation had grown sharp, but something nudged me to pick up. Hello. A soft inhale. Then a woman's voice, shaky but composed. Is this Avery Cole? Yes. This is Miranda Harper. For a moment, the diner noise around me blurred forks scraping plates, Hank banging pans, someone laughing too loud in the back booth. I stepped outside into the cool night air. Miranda exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for a week. I'm not calling to blame you. I want to say that first. I leaned against the brick wall. You don't owe me anything. She let out a bitter, brittle laugh. I owe you the truth, at least once. Silence stretched, but not the heavy kind. More like 2 people standing on opposite banks of a river they'd both fallen into at different times. He told me you died in a house fire, she said quietly. I closed my eyes. That was new. He said you inhaled too much smoke trying to save your dog. Her voice trembled. He made you sound like a saint, a tragedy wrapped in heroism. And I pitied him. I admired him. I thought I'd won the heart of a man who had survived unimaginable grief. A gust of wind tugged at my apron. He didn't mention you, she added. He worshipped the version of you he invented. That landed harder than I expected. Not because it hurt, but because it made so much sense. Ethan had never mourned me. He'd mourned the fictional woman who made him look noble. Miranda continued, I didn't know anything until the wedding day. My mom got a call from the venue about you. The planner was panicking. Then my dad received 2 anonymous messages and a voicemail from someone asking why the groom's dead wife was contacting the office. She paused. When I confronted him, he cracked. Not with truth, with excuses. And when excuses didn't work, he turned cold, like I was interfering with his narrative. I heard the soft rustle of fabric like she was wiping her face. I'm staying at my sister's, she said. The engagement is on pause. Maybe permanently. I'm not calling to ask what happened between you two. I already know enough. Another pause. But I want to ask you something, woman to woman. I braced myself. Did he love you ever? It should have been the hardest question of my life. It wasn't. I think he loved the version of himself he was when I believed in him, I said. Not me. Miranda let out a trembling breath. That makes everything make sense. We stood in silence for a moment. Then she said the last thing I expected. I'm sorry he used your life as a stage prop. It hit deeper than anything Ethan had ever said. Not because it healed me, healing had already begun, long before this call, but because it acknowledged something nobody in his world had ever seen I was real. Not a ghost, not a myth. Not a convenient tragedy. Real. Thank you, I said quietly. Truly. She sniffed. Whatever happens next with him, that's his burden, not yours. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. We ended the call with no promises, no predictions, no shared hatred, just shared clarity. When I walked back inside the diner, the bell jingled softly. The world hadn't shifted. The air hadn't changed. But I had. And the truth, the whole messy, heavy, undeniable truth, had finally done what it needed to do. It had freed me, and left Ethan standing alone in the wreckage he built board by board, lie by lie. A full year passed before I realized I no longer kept track of dates tied to Ethan. I didn't mark the day he told me not to attend his graduation. I didn't mark the day he threw my life into a duffel bag and shoved me out the door. I didn't mark the day his wedding crumbled under the weight of his own fiction. Those days had once lived under my skin like bruises. Now they felt like someone else's history, a book I'd closed and returned to the library. Life didn't shift all at once. It moved in small, steady increments, like the diner's neon sign flickering back to life after a rainstorm. Faint at first, then bright, then constant. The first real shift came in early spring on a morning so clear it almost hurt to look at. I was unlocking portside diner keys cold between my fingers when Frank stepped out of his office, holding a clipboard and a cup of instant coffee. He's a blunt man. No small talk, no fluff, no metaphor. You're good at this, he said, handing me the clipboard. I glanced down. Shift manager Avery Cole effective immediately. I swallowed hard. Frank, are you sure he didn't look up from stirring his coffee? You show up. You tell the truth. People trust you. That's management material. That was Frank's version of a congratulations speech. I felt it all the way to my ribs. From then on, my days had a new rhythm. I wasn't just seating customers and clearing plates. I was training new hires, balancing schedules, solving problems before they even touched the dining room. I'd never had authority in my life, but I learned I didn't need to raise my voice to hold a space. I just needed to stand in it fully. Evenings were mine, finally completely mine. I used them well. I signed up for a writing class at the community college 2 blocks from my apartment. The first session, my hands trembled so hard on the pen that the instructor gently touched my shoulder. Nervous, she asked. A little, I admitted. Good. Nervous means you're doing something real. She was right. Writing terrified me. Not because I lacked the skill, but because for the first time the story on the page had nothing to do with Ethan. It had everything to do with me. I wrote about the diner, about the people I served and the conversations they didn't know I overheard, about the way grief tastes like cold tea, about the resilience in small acts, tightening apron strings, wiping down booths, counting tip money with cracked fingers. My classmates encouraged me. My professor nudged me to write scenes I'd been avoiding. And slowly, almost reluctantly, my voice emerged on the page, raw but steady. Landon would sometimes peek over my shoulder during break. "You're gonna publish that someday," he'd say. I'd snort, "It's homework." "Yeah," he'd reply, and homework becomes something else when the right person writes it. Hank, as usual, said nothing. Instead, he left a slice of pie on my notebook every Friday night. Blueberry if he thought the week had been hard. Apple if he thought I needed sweetness. He had a whole emotional language built out of dessert. And I learned to read every word. My apartment changed with me. The studio above the bookstore no longer felt like a stopgap, a shelter after a storm. It became a home, a real one. I replaced the wobbly table with a sturdy second-hand oak one. Added new plants to the windowsill ferns, succulents herbs that made the kitchen smell like summer. I bought soft curtains that turned the afternoon sun gold. Even the old reading chair, the one I'd rescued from a curb, felt different under me now. Less like a reminder of what I'd lost, more like a seat in a life I'd chosen deliberately. One night, as rain tapped against the window and my kettle whistled softly, I realized something that made my chest warm. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living. Quietly, gently, fully. The past hadn't vanished. It just stopped leading the way. Every so often, people in town would whisper updates about Ethan, how he'd been moved to a less public-facing role, how the Harpers had withdrawn their donations to his firm, how he showed up to court one day, looking like a man still trying to outrun his own shadow. Those updates reached me like distant thunder. I heard them, and then they faded. His consequences were no longer my story. What mattered was the life unfolding around me now in small, beautiful pieces. A diner booth at sunrise. Ink stains on my fingers from late-night writing. Emma snoring on my couch after movie nights. The hum of Mr. Levine's bookstore closing downstairs. Tea steaming beside my laptop as words spilled out freely, unafraid. This life was simple, unflashy, humble, but for the first time in years it was wholly, undeniably mine. Summer crept in slowly, soft, warm, almost apologetic. The kind of summer that didn't demand attention but offered it. And for the first time in a long time, I had space to accept it. The diner got busier when tourists arrived. More noise, more mess, more chaos in the best way. I found myself laughing more often. Not the brittle laugh I'd forced during the bad years, but real belly-deep laughter that surprised even me. One afternoon, in the middle of a slammed Saturday rush, Frank slapped a laminated card onto the counter. Avery Cole, floor manager. I blinked. Didn't I already have this title? He shrugged. Now it's official, and you're getting a raise. I stared at him. Why he didn't look up from the pickle jar he was wrestling open. Because you earned it. Simple words. But they landed like a soft landing after a long, turbulent flight. Later that week, my writing professor pulled me aside after class. She held one of my essays a piece about Lavender Field's silence and choosing to walk away pressed between her fingers. This, she said, tapping the page isn't homework anymore. This is your voice. I swallowed, unsure how to respond. Submit it, she urged. There's a regional contest. No expectations, just let your voice breathe. A year ago, I would have laughed. Now I nodded. When I walked home that night, streetlights spilled warm halos across the pavement. My apartment window glowed from above the bookstore gold comforting steady. Something inside me expanded at the sight. Home. Not the kind built with someone else's lies, the kind built with my own hands, one choice at a time. I climbed the stairs, kicked off my shoes, and opened my laptop. The soft keyboard clicks blended with the muffled rustle of pages from Mr. Levine, in Arsenal closing his shop downstairs. Words came easily. Not because my life was perfect, far from it, but because I finally understood what story I was living. Not a tragedy, not a revenge arc, not a cautionary tale, a reclamation. Around late August, I got an email from the community college. Your piece, The Sound of Lavender Falling, is a finalist. Award ceremony next month. I laughed out loud in my kitchen, startling my ferns so badly it shed 3 leaves. I didn't care. I pressed the email to my chest and let myself feel the warmth blooming deep in my ribs. I never told Emma how much her unwavering belief carried me through the darkest months, but she hugged me so hard when I showed her the email that I think she already knew. Life kept moving quietly, softly. Evenings writing, mornings managing, weekends cleaning my apartment with music in the background. Small joys, small rituals, small victories. And every few months, someone in town would ask casually, "Hey, whatever happened to that law guy?" The one from the wedding. I always answered the same way. He's not my story anymore, because he wasn't. The last symbol of the past, the burgundy dress, hung in my closet for months longer than it needed to. Not because I wanted to keep it, but because I needed to understand why I hadn't let it go. One Sunday morning, sunlight spilled onto my floor in long, warm bands. The apartment smelled like Earl Grey and lemon cleaner. I opened my closet, lifted the dress from its hanger, and studied it. It wasn't a relic anymore. Just fabric. Just color. Just something I'd survived in. I folded it carefully, slid it into a tote bag, and walked 2 blocks to the little thrift store by the pier. The same place where I'd once bought it, hopeful it would carry me into a moment worth remembering. It ended up doing exactly that, just not the moment I expected. I placed the dress on the donation counter. The clerk, a teenager with chipped black nail polish, held it up. "This is beautiful," I smiled. "It deserves a new story." I walked out without looking back. That night, sitting at my desk, the window cracked open to catch the ocean breeze, I wrote a line in my journal. I knew I'd return to someday. Being erased by someone else doesn't mean you disappear. You only disappear when you stop choosing yourself. The sentence stayed with me long after I closed the notebook. It became my quiet truth, my compass, my ending and my beginning. As months turned into a full year, the ache of what happened dulled into something softer, like a scar that no longer hurts when touched. And one evening, as I watched the streetlights flicker on one by one, I understood the moral of my story. Peace wasn't the reward for surviving him. Peace was the revenge. Before I went to bed, I typed the final lines for my video narration words, meant for anyone who'd ever been erased, overlooked, or rewritten by someone else's ambition. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, in your own marriage, or in your own life, subscribe. This story isn't over, and neither are you.